Hi, everybody. Dr. Carolyn here. And today I'm going to be talking about New Year's resolutions, but with a twist. I'm not going to be talking about how to make yet another New Year's resolution that will eventually not come true, that you'll forget about or get too stressed about doing or any of that. We know that New Year is a time when we want to make changes. And oh my God, especially after 2020 is over, I think many of us would like to see 2021 be different. We'd like to experience some hope for our future and shake off all the past troubles that we've been experiencing in 2020 and make a fresh start. And that's a normal, natural instinct because we often see the new year as just kind of that um, fulcrum for change, that time when we should be kind of reflecting on what's gone right and what's gone wrong, etc. So, as you know, most New Year's resolutions don't uh, come to fruition, but most of us just keep powering through and wait for the next end of the year to make a new set of resolutions. So, but 2020 was a different year. So, how should we approach this new year? That's my question for you. How should we really think about and how should we, uh, what expectations should we have for 2021? Or should we have any expectations at all, given how I know I had a lot of expectations for 2020 and things didn't go to plan for sure. So maybe that's the case with you too. So let's look at how you might change how you approach this new year. So 2020 was a doozy. We had political strife, which is ongoing, sadly. We've had social unrest. We've had, um, and to top it off, let us not forget about a global pandemic, which has resulted in it's just a traumatic and tragic loss of life of fellow Americans. So, should we even still hold on to this ritual of making resolutions? Should we still be even optimistic? I know that's something that many of the people that I talk to say, well, just think positively and things will get better for you. Well, I recently listened to a really interesting podcast interview with Michael J. Fox. I don't know how many of you know of him. He's an actor. Back to the Future was one of his famous ones. He was also on The Good Wife and other shows. Well, I heard this interview on Fresh Air on NPR. And Michael J. Fox has had Parkinson's disease for over 30 years now, which seems like the time has flown. And what he talked about on this interview really caught my attention because he talked about what he had learned from having Parkinson's. And he said, and honestly, this is not a direct quote, but he said that he has, even after his diagnosis, always tried to present an optimistic spin on his life. Give hope to other Parkinson's sufferers that things could get better, that you could still live your life. And to a great degree, he has. He's continued to act for 30 years in pretty good roles. And yet, behind the scenes, he has struggled with Parkinson's. He built a foundation. He's done a lot to do that optimistic spin on his life and always trying to present that positive side. But after a recent series of medical issues, he reached a low point and he realized that he needed to learn to be an optimist and a realist at the same time. And for him, this meant no longer always painting a rosy picture, no longer thinking or even saying everything is going to turn out to be okay. For him, this was really an important realization, especially given how he had gone about kind of fighting Parkinson's and overcoming all of his challenges and so on. But he realized that this positive spin on things was not sustainable because things honestly don't always get better, which can lead to disappointment and then feelings of failure. So and what he said that really brought it all together for me was that having gratitude is the glue that sustains optimism and hope, no matter what your situation may be. So the glue between optimism and realism is gratitude. Well, you may be asking, what do I have to be grateful for? Maybe you lost your job. Maybe you're just overwhelmed with stress, financial problems, tired of having your kids home, being homeschooled by you while you're working a full-time job. So many things have affected all of us. Maybe you've been sick like myself. I had COVID in March and it's been a very long recovery. I only feel like in the last month that I'm turning the corner with all of the long hauler symptoms that I've experienced from COVID. But also, maybe you've been struggling with binge eating, compulsive overeating, food addiction, emotional eating. Maybe you've even gained the COVID 15, or maybe in your case, it was the COVID 30. So, that may mean then that your resolutions for 2020, perhaps to stop binging or to start an exercise program or whatever those resolutions were, to eat more healthy, etc. But maybe those didn't come through for you. But now may be the time, rather than setting yet another resolution that's, this big grand thing I'm going to accomplish in my life, maybe the time now is to make smaller changes. You may not know that gratitude actually is not just a kind of woo-woo, new agey concept. Gratitude is linked to overall well-being and health, and there's a lot of research to back it up. So here are some of the benefits from research studies on reflecting on what you're grateful for. So daily gratitude, or the practice of daily gratitude, is linked to more frequent physical activity and fewer medical problems. People who practice gratitude tend to take better care of themselves and engage in more healthy behaviors. The practice of gratitude is, if you focus on gratitude, being grateful on a daily basis, you're more likely to feel better about your life and to feel more optimistic. Remember, the gratitude is the glue between optimism and realism. So gratitude can also contribute to feeling happier and having better social relationships. If you're a grateful person who sees gratitude as a permanent part of your personality rather than just a temporary something on your to-do list to check off, you'll be more likely to take better care of yourself and engage in healthy behaviors such as physical activity, eating a healthy diet, and getting regular medical checkups. And being able to feel grateful, especially in the midst of difficult or stressful times, helps you cope better with the stress. So even if you're thinking to yourself, what do I have to feel grateful for? Just find that one thing that may help you feel grateful, and that will help you deal with the stress better. We know, for example, in studies that after the September 11th terrorist attacks, studies showed a marked increase in feelings of gratitude, even in the face of tremendous tragedy. So gratitude helped offer a buffer for people against those negative effects of trauma, making those who experience gratitude less likely to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. So feeling gratitude is one thing, but not expressing it is like, the metaphor is like wrapping a present and not giving it. So there's a whole spectrum of ways that you can express gratitude, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. So when your life is a reflection of what you value most, what you love, you're more likely to be living a life that you're grateful for. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that many times we don't really register that our behaviors are a violation of our values. So, for example, if your value is to model healthy behaviors for your children, and yet you find yourself uh, continuing to practice unhealthy behaviors, that may be a violation of that value. Now, obviously, we need to all of us need to give ourselves a break, to give ourselves a little grace, because we have faced in 2020 uh, challenges of epic proportion that none of us in our lifetimes have ever had to go through. So it may be difficult to easily think of things to be grateful for if you've had this tough year, but what you value most in life is what you want to focus on and look at how the events of 2020 have helped you to tend what you value the most. So for me, as I mentioned, my lengthy recovery from COVID-19 forced me to reevaluate my workaholic personality. I had no choice. I was so exhausted from the COVID infection that I had to rest. Resting, I noticed that I started to be able to be more in touch with my intuition, to feel like I was, being guided in certain ways. Uh, I started to give up on having to push myself so hard. Like, this didn't get done today on my to-do list, so I'm just going to power through and stay up half the night. But I couldn't do that anymore. So I had to stop and rest and manage my stress better. I also genuinely value my family relationships. My family is my biggest source of support, particularly my two sisters. So, I've spent more time than ever before talking to them on the phone or by Zoom, and, being more available to them when they need help or support. So I'm really grateful to them during uh, and grateful for my recovering health. So if you value, for example, spending time with your kids, the pandemic may have enabled you to tend what you value, even though it was hard at first. Maybe as the year went on, you began to realize that you really enjoyed that, spending time with your kids. So I've heard many parents talk about how the pandemic has changed their relationships within their family and with their children for the better. Or maybe you value being appreciated at your job and you ended up being laid off of the job where you weren't being appreciated. I've heard that story many times from my patients and people in the Anchor program. And you were able to pivot and find either a new job that works better for you, or decide on making a complete career change or taking your career in a different direction. So while these experiences may not have seemed fortuitous in the moment, looking back, you may be able to see that certain aspects of those experiences which you're grateful for. So I just want to give you an exercise to help you practice gratitude and develop gratitude as a daily practice. So one thing you can do is make a list of the situations you have experienced in 2020, and situations perhaps that at the time you didn't feel grateful for. And then ask yourself also, uh, make a list, number 2, of areas of your life where you feel you are struggling to be grateful. So, for example, my mother does a lot of thoughtful things for me, but I rarely show her my appreciation. That would be an example of an area where you're struggling to be grateful. You may be not only not grateful, but be irritable with her. Number 3, in response to the list above, write a thank you list of specific actions you're willing to take to show your gratitude to people in areas that you listed. Now, don't make this another big, massive to-do list. It could be something as simple as texting someone you haven't been in communication with for after a while. So I have a friend who lives in Seattle, and when I lived in Denver, she used to visit Denver to come and see her mom, and I would see her more often. And then when she moved and I moved, we kind of lost touch. And she did something really wonderful. She texted me and we started a text conversation. Then I thought, Why am I just texting? I'm just going to call her. And I called her and we talked on the phone for an hour. And that felt so wonderful. So it doesn't have to be big things, it could be tiny things. Um, bringing something over to someone's house so they don't have to go out shopping. Whatever works for you and doesn't add to your burden. Being grateful is not about, making your life harder. It's really just an expression, or it should be just an expression of what you're feeling, wrapping that present, but also giving the present to the person who deserves it. Whether it may be you too. And number 4, identify a daily ritual you can use to practice gratitude. I'll give you just a couple examples. Write down 3 things you're grateful for before you go to bed. Say thank you to 3 people in your life every day. Take a few minutes at the start or end of each day to take 3 deep breaths, breathing in gratitude in each breath and feeling the energy of gratitude pulsing throughout your body with each beat of your heart. So those are some of the ways in which you can start to get in touch with, gratitude. And maybe there are many people on your list that you haven't even thought to be grateful for. Maybe it's your spouse or partner, something they've done for you. Maybe it's an act of kindness from a stranger or acquaintance. Maybe there are times when you've gotten some emotional support from a friend or a coworker. Perhaps a coworker has helped you in some way finish a project or get something done at work. Maybe they're just things in nature that you're grateful for. I remember talking about just being isolated in the quarantine for where I didn't go outside my house for days, and then I went out to go shopping at the grocery store and turned the corner and noticed that my rose bush had bloomed with these beautiful coral roses. And I just felt a moment of appreciation for that. Hope that's not too sappy. Maybe you're grateful for pets and their contribution to your life. My son was recently visiting, and he has he is a puppy, but he's a big puppy who's 18 months, and then their older dog who's almost 14. Just grateful to be able to see the dogs that I hadn't seen in over a year and a half even. I had never met the new dog who's 18 months, and I hadn't seen the older dog for, a couple of years. So I just felt grateful to be able to, spend time with them and pet them and remember the times when the older one was younger and used to burrow through the sand with her nose. All of those things, are ways to express gratitude. So see what you can do and see what works for you without it being a burden or adding to your to-do list. And if you're struggling with binge eating, compulsive overeating, food addiction, or emotional eating, and if that got worse during 2020, you're not alone. And just know that it takes a lot of support to heal from food and body image issues. So if you're ready to take the next realistic step towards true recovery versus the optimistic New Year's diet, you can set up a free consult to talk about your own individual food and body image issues. And I'll put the link in the show notes below. So I hope this has been helpful to you, and that rather than doing an automatic New Year's resolution, that you spend a little bit of time reflecting about how gratitude can help you stay optimistic and at the same time be realistic without, that Pollyanna optimism. So hope it's helpful. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and that way you can get notifications. Well, you have to turn on your notifications, of course. I'm sure most of you know that. And that way you'll know when the next YouTube video is coming up. So I will be talking more about binge eating and food addiction in the new year, and I look forward to speaking with you soon. Dr. Ross, signing out.